Hi folks, today we're going to be talking about wrenches. So welcome back. I know it's not the topic that we normally are discussing here, although I have been branching off into tools more lately. But a little bit of backstory on this is that Western Forge went out of business. They used to do the forging blanks for Proto, SK, some of the other US brands. And so a lot of your US manufacturers have had to source from elsewhere. And so the wrenches that I had been buying for a number of years, they're just not accessible anymore in the same way that they were made. So I decided to look around a little bit and see what other options are out there from the US and around the world. So I've got a whole assortment here, different things I've gotten to try. The only one of these I've actually used, one of them pretty much identically in a large amount, is this Crescent spud. Let's just go through the whole line here real quick. I've got them arranged in order of price, trying to kind of find the sweet spot for something that isn't too expensive, isn't too cheap, something that is a reasonable amount to spend that I can continue to purchase for years. Because I work in an industrial setting and I go through wrenches. They get broken, they get lost, they get borrowed and don't come back. So let's start on the left here. We got Crescent, pretty common brand. You see these at really every hardware store. They're all over the place. Crescent is, to me, unfortunately, made in China, but I will say this: Crescent as a company has done a good job holding their quality control on their imported products to a pretty good standard. These are not going to be as finesse as the others, but I'll say they're not bad. This is not a junk wrench. Sure, the chrome plating on it's a little cheap. It does have some slop in it, some rattle. The rubberized coating on it is a cheap material that just in handling, I mean, this hasn't been used as a tool yet. It's just been tossed around with these other wrenches. It's already starting to kind of chip off. I do tend to buy probably half a dozen of these a year, just because if I'm going to do something where it's going to get broken, it's going to get really nasty and chemicals or something, then I'll reach for a Crescent. If someone needs to borrow a wrench and I think they're going to do something stupid with it or lose it, they get to borrow the Crescent. I'm going to say I treat them as disposable. I just kind of accept that there's going to be an attrition rate to them, and they're relatively inexpensive enough. If you get just the black oxide finished plain old 10-inch wrench, they're like 16 bucks. This one is, I think, 21. Same with the spud, right about $21. So kind of a cheap-ish, certainly not the cheapest out there, but a cheap-ish wrench that generally works well, has a decent fit and finish, and I don't have to be too sad if it gets lost or broken or covered in nasty stuff. I really like their 10-inch spud wrench, actually, because it has the head of the 8-inch wrench. So if you were to get this wrench in an 8-inch, it would have the same size head as the 10-inch spud. Really nice to be able to get into kind of thinner areas. It adjusts smoothly. It has some play in it, though. I mean, it's definitely not a really premium wrench, but does good enough. And of course, a spud wrench, depending on what you do, is sometimes pretty handy. In an industrial setting, I use a spud wrench fairly often, and it's a pretty good one. Now, here's one that I have not tried before. This is a Wright brand wrench, which is a US company, but this is made in Spain. I think Wright was probably sourcing from Western Forge before, although I didn't have one previously to really verify that. But now these are sourced from Spain. I'm pretty certain they're made by the Irega company, which we'll get to in a minute. But Wright brand, US company, made in Spain, 10-inch wrench, adjusts out to 1 3/8, just like the Crescent. That's pretty standard amongst these 1 3/8 inch. That's what most of these adjust to. The little spud with the 8-inch head, it only adjusts to 1 1/8 inch. That's one of the exceptions. But 1 3/8, pretty middle of the pack on that. It is in the black oxide finish, which if you've had tools in the black oxide before, you know that you can try to keep them oiled, but they always end up kind of developing some patina to them, especially on the ground sides of the head here. I've even cleaned this up with some oil a little bit and steel wool prior to starting the video, but you can still probably see some of the discoloration there. It's more or less inevitable on these black oxide wrenches. If that bothers you, I wouldn't get a black oxide wrench. You just kind of have to accept they develop a look that's sort of like this after a while, where they're slightly rusted into a stable situation, and that's kind of what you get. Not a big deal, but if it bothers you, then it bothers you, so don't get that. But really nice wrench for about $31. I like the fact that it is fairly light, at least it feels light. The web here of the handle is very, very thin with these wide kind of flanks to it, to where you get lightweight, but you have a good purchase on it, and when you're trying to push, it doesn't really dig into your hand as much. I don't like really thin handled wrenches, because especially as you're trying to tighten something or loosen something that's been kind of rusted in place, after a while that can really kind of wear on your hands. So that nice wide profile to it there, I think is really nice. Pretty nice wrench for about 31 bucks. Next up, I've got the Klein, also made in Spain. Now, these wrenches were made in the US up until a few years ago, but made in Spain now. The quality seems very, very similar to what I'm used to. Opens to 1 3/8 inch also. Very smooth running. I like the rubberized handle on the Kleins. It is, in my experience, because I have used these before, it is a robust coating, and it's nice that it can be re-dipped if you want to, just like the Crescent, but also if you just cut it off eventually when it gets beat up, the underlying wrench is a perfectly reasonable and usable shape. It's got a good feel in the hand, smooth running. Not a whole lot to say really. Just a traditional American brand, made in Spain now. Probably by Irega, maybe not. I don't know for sure. But a nice option. Now, this one I'm really excited to talk about. This is the Irega brand one, which, made in Spain. I think they've been in business making adjustable wrenches since 1914 or something like that. So a very long history of making high quality adjustables in Europe. Very, very smooth, just like these are. I would say that the Irega might have a little less play, but I really think that might just be variation wrench to wrench and not an overall representation of the manufacturing. I think they call this like a triple chrome. It's a very, very nice chrome job. Very consistent. More dull, more like a hard chrome rather than like a plating. We'll see how it holds up. But as you can probably see, the Wright brand and the Irega brand are more or less identical. The Irega, of course, is chromed. It has the interesting aspect that Irega, being a company out of Europe, out of Spain, the right-handed position for this shows the metric, whereas the Wright brand, being a US company, just having the wrench made in Spain, the right-hand position shows inches. So kind of interesting difference there, and on the opposite sides of them, the left-handed position, the Irega shows inches, the Wright shows metric. So depending on if you're right or left-handed depends on which one of these you need to get. You know, or also if you're using metric fasteners or not, I guess. So, kind of an interesting thing there, just to point out, but you can tell these are, I mean, they came out of the same forge. I mean, just identical, except for the superficial aspects. Identical. But let's move on. Bahco, Swedish company. Wrench is made in Spain. So it's kind of interesting that a lot of companies that need a wrench and want it high quality seem to be sourcing from Spain now. This one has the claim to fame, 1 3/4 inches of opening. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Really long jaws to it. It has this ergo handle, nice rubberized, very comfortable. Seems it's quite thick. Looks like it'll be durable. Probably wouldn't want to beat on it, especially not so because this is actually inlaid into the handle. So I'm not sure if this starts to deteriorate eventually, what you can really do about that. Maybe wrap tennis racket tape around it. Hopefully it holds up really well, is chemical resistant, oil resistant, all of that, and can give a long and successful service. But really cool that it opens that wide all the way up to that 1 3/4 inch. Just for comparison, I'll grab I mean, that's pretty wide for a 10-inch wrench. The head on it is huge, so if you're trying to get into a confined spot, it may not be ideal. I'm gonna see how that works out. I kind of have hope that because the jaws are so long that you could probably just kind of work it in there, but we'll see. I'm not sure. This may be more of a specialized tool for someone that needs to work on really big fasteners that aren't under a lot of torque. It may not be as good as a general purpose wrench. We'll see. Maybe their 8-inch one that has a head more similar in size to these but is shorter offers some advantages. I don't have that one. I got the 10-inch just because that's what I'm used to. But I'll try it out and kind of see how that goes. But just something to keep in mind. And then over here, most expensive one is SK, which I believe this is US made. It doesn't say it on it, and it doesn't really say it on their website, but it is not the same as the Chinese SK that I got recently, so I think this is US made. It definitely seems to be similar to their old US made wrenches, just with a different forging. They used to be Western Forge. This is not, because Western Forge is out of business and it's just not the same. It doesn't have the Western Forge marks on it. This is some sort of nickel-based finish, which I think is really cool. It feels slick, almost like nickel boron. The manufacturing quality on this is wonderful. It only opens to 1 1/4 inches. Sometimes that may be a little inconvenient. I don't typically find it to be a problem for most of what I do, but definitely something to keep in mind. It is the most expensive of these. Their price on it, on their website, $58.01. They often run them on sale, about $52 or so, but still a fairly expensive wrench along with the Bahco at $57.07 for the Bahco. So right around the same price point. This one opens a lot more than the others. This one opens a bit less than the others. So you kind of have to weigh your options there. The SK, maybe it's a little on the narrow side. The Bahco, maybe, unless you have a specialized application, you don't need it to open that far. For me, I'm kind of that feeling. I'd rather have a little bit more opening than the SK does, even though this usually is enough for me. I don't really care for how narrow the handle is. The panel is quite thick in relation to the flanks here. And so you end up with something that's not particularly lightweight, but also not particularly ergonomic. So in spite of how nice the finish is and how smooth the machine work is on the head, I mean, this is a very, very well made wrench. But I don't care for their forging. I just don't think it's as good as some of the competition, unfortunately, even though that's the US made option. I'm kind of inclined to go with sort of the middle of the pack here. I think the Bahco's nice, but pretty big head on it. I think these three really represent your kind of prime point for something that you're going to use consistently every day, that's going to put in good work, that you try to take care of. I mean, not beat it up too much, but also not be afraid to put it through some hard use. The Wright is the cheaper one of this bunch, being the black oxide, $31.24. Klein, $35.99. And Irega is $39.23. And there's different options amongst that. I think Irega has a black oxide that is lower in price. You can see what's out there. But one of these three, in that kind of $30 to $40 range, to me is kind of the happy spot. They all open to 1 3/8 inch. I'm kind of inclined to go with the Klein. For me, I like that it's a American brand that I'm familiar with. I like Klein tools. The rubberized handle, in my experience on these, is quite good. It is chromed. It has number markings that I think will probably be readable for a long time, just because it doesn't have the oxidation issues. I don't use the number markings that often, but it is nice to have them just in those instances where it would be handy. Got metric on the other side. And if this rubberized coating comes off, you still have a normal wrench underneath. There's nothing, nothing making it deficient really if the rubber coating comes off. And it's really easy to re-dip it if you wanted to do that. So that's probably where I would put my money. I think these are also really good options. Everything, of course, here has an application depending on what you're doing with it. But for me, I think Klein kind of fills the sweet spot. But I'm going to use all of them. I'll give you guys updates on anything I find out during actual use. But that's all I have for now. I will probably mention real quick that Klein does have a 10-inch spud wrench, kind of a bulkier head than this, kind of a bulkier head than even the regular 10-inch wrench. But it's $50 for a US made Klein spud wrench. Nice wrench though. So if you need a spud wrench and want US made or want Klein, that is an option. But for a regular day-to-day wrench, I think the Klein 10-inch offers pretty much the best blend of quality, good fit and finish, nice comfortable handle, and should last you a while. So thanks for watching, folks. I hope you found it interesting. Just talking about tools a little bit, kind of a show and tell deal, but we'll see how this stuff goes, and I'll give any relevant updates. Thanks for watching.